The arena was vast and ancient. Stone seats rose in great circles toward a dark sky filled with 3 moons. Thousands have filled those seats, their scaled bodies packed tight, their yellow eyes fixed on the center of the arena where 12 humans knelt in chains. Captain Lucy felt the cold metal around her wrists and tried to keep her breathing steady. Beside her, Lieutenant Shaw was shaking. He was only 28 years old, too young to die on an alien world, far from home, far from everyone who loved him. On her other side, Sergeant Cole knelt with her jaw set and her eyes hard, had seen combat, had faced death before, but even could not hide the fear in her eyes. The crowd was chanting something in the language. Lucy did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. They wanted blood. They wanted to see the humans die. A great horn sounded across the arena. The chanting stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. From the far end of the arena, a figure emerged. He was old. That was the first thing Lucy noticed. They were a reptilian species, covered in scales that shifted from green to gray as they aged. This one was almost entirely gray. His scales were cracked and from wounds that must have been earned across centuries of battle. He walked slowly, but there was strength in every step. In his hand, he carried a curved blade that gleamed under the light of the 3 moons. High Arbiter. Lucy had heard the name whispered by their guards. 400 years old. The greatest warrior that had ever produced. Victor of a dozen wars. Killer of 10,000 enemies. And now he had been given the honor of executing the human prisoners. Stopped before the kneeling humans. His yellow eyes moved across their faces, one by one, studying them with an expression Lucy could not read. She forced herself to meet his gaze. If she was going to die, she would die looking her killer in the eye. The old warrior raised his blade. The crowd roared with approval. And then he stopped. The blade hung in the air, stood frozen, his eyes still fixed on Lucy. The crowd grew quiet, confused by the delay. Seconds passed. The blade did not fall. Whispered beside her, "What is happening?" Lucy did not answer. She could not look away from the old warrior's face. Something was changing in his expression, something she did not understand. Slowly lowered the blade. The crowd murmured in shock. An official rushed forward, speaking rapidly in their language, silenced him with a single look. When the old warrior spoke, his voice carried across the entire arena. It was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You have brought these humans here to die," he said. "You have told me they violated our sacred space. You have told me they are enemies of the people. You have given me the honor of ending their lives." He paused, his eyes swept across the crowd. "But before they die, I will tell them something. I will tell them what humans truly are, and you will listen. All of you will listen." The crowd was silent now. Lucy felt her heart pounding in her chest. She did not understand what was happening, but she felt something shifting in the air around them. Turned back to face the humans. He looked at Lucy, then at. His face was unreadable. "I have lived for 400 years, he said. "I have fought in wars across this galaxy. I have killed enemies from 100 different species. I have seen courage and cowardice. I have seen honor and betrayal. I thought I understood all that the universe could offer. I thought there was nothing left that could surprise me." He knelt down, bringing his face close to Lucy's. She could see every crack in his ancient scales, every scar that told of battles survived. "And then I met humans." He stood again and turned to face the crowd. His voice grew stronger. 60 years ago, I encountered this species for the first time. I was already old then, already tired of war, already certain that I had seen everything worth seeing. But humans proved me wrong. They taught me things I never thought I would learn. They showed me strength I never thought existed. He began to walk slowly around the kneeling prisoners, his blade still in his hand but lowered at his side. "You sit in your seats and you see these 12 creatures in chains. You see soft skin and fragile bodies. You see a species that lives for less than a century, that has been traveling the stars for only a few hundred years, that has no claws, no scales, no natural weapons. You look at them and you see weakness. He stopped walking and faced the crowd directly. You are wrong. The words hung in the air. Lucy felt tears forming in her eyes, though she did not know why. I have watched humans for 60 years, continued. I have fought beside them and against them. I have seen them at their worst and at their best. And I tell you now, before all the people, that this species is unlike anything we have ever encountered. He raised his blade and pointed it at the crowd. Let me tell you about the first time I truly understood what humans are. Let me tell you about a battle that should have been my death. Let me tell you about a species that saved my life when they had no reason to do so. The crowd was completely silent. Not a single moved or spoke. Closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, Lucy saw something there that surprised her. It was not hatred. It was not contempt. It was something that looked almost like respect. 60 years ago, he said, on a dying space station called, I learned the human word for compassion, and it changed everything I thought I knew about strength. He began to speak, and the arena listened. His voice filled the arena as he spoke of the past. His yellow eyes grew distant, seeing things that had happened 60 years ago, things that still burned bright in his memory. Station was dying. The great mining facility hung in the darkness of space, fires burning along its outer hull, emergency lights flashing red in every corridor. The horde had come without warning. Thousands of them, creatures that knew nothing of mercy, nothing of surrender. They did not take prisoners. They only killed. Commander, then only 340 years old, stood in the main control room with the last of his warriors. There were perhaps 200 soldiers left. Outside, they were cutting through the blast doors. The sound of their claws against metal filled the station. We cannot hold them, his second officer said. There are too many. Knew this was true. He had already sent the evacuation order. Civilian transports were fleeing the station, but most would not make it. The ships were hunting them down one by one. Then we will die with honor, said. He raised his blade. We will take as many of them with us as we can. His warriors roared their approval. They did not fear death. They only feared dying without purpose. And then the message came through the communication system. Station, this is the human merchant vessel Dawn Chaser. We are carrying medical supplies, requesting permission to dock. Stared at the communication panel, a human ship, here, now, in the middle of a massacre. Human vessel, you must flee, he responded. The station is lost, the will kill you. There was a pause, then a human voice came back, calm and steady. Understood, we are docking anyway. We have room for refugees. Open Bay 7. Could not believe what he was hearing. No species would fly into a battle like this. No logical creature would choose death for strangers. He wanted to argue, to order them away, but there was no time. The blast doors were failing. Open Bay 7, he commanded. The Dawn Chaser landed in the docking bay as the broke through the first corridor. Watched through the security cameras as the human ship's doors opened and people began running out. There were only 4 of them, 4 humans against thousands of. Captain Henry Vance was a large man with gray hair and a face lined by years of hard living. He moved with purpose, shouting orders. Behind him came a young woman, Maria Santos, running toward the pilot controls of a nearby cargo shuttle. An older man with gentle eyes, Dr. Carl, was already setting up a medical station right there in the docking bay. And the 4th was a woman whose name never learned. She was small, with dark hair and no armor, no weapons, just a civilian on a merchant ship. The refugees came flooding into the bay. Civilians, workers, families. They were terrified, crying, pushing against each other in their desperation to escape. They were right behind them. Maria Santos got the cargo shuttle running. She flew it out of the bay and into the swarm of ships outside. watched her weave between enemy vessels, drawing their fire, creating an opening for the civilian transports to escape. It was suicide flying. No pilot should have survived it, but she made it back, and then she went out again. 3 times she flew into that swarm. 3 times she came back. Doctor worked without stopping. Wounded were carried to him, some missing limbs, some burned, some dying. He treated them all. When a warrior broke into the bay, the old doctor did not run. He grabbed a metal pipe and stood between the creature and his patients. A soldier killed the before it could reach him, but was already turning back to his work, already treating the next wounded person. And the woman with no name watched her run into the corridors where they were advancing. She was looking for survivors. She found a child, barely old enough to walk, hiding under a collapsed beam. The child's mother was dead beside her. The woman picked up the child. She held the little one against her chest and ran back toward the docking bay. Spotted her. It fired. The shot missed by inches. She did not stop running. Met her at the entrance to the bay. The child in her arms was crying, clutching at the human's shirt. Why? Asked. He could not understand. Why would you risk your life for a child of another species? The woman looked at him. Her eyes were tired but steady. Because she needed help, she said. Then she handed him the child and ran back into the corridors to look for more survivors. The battle lasted 4 more hours. Was wounded in the fighting, a blade cutting deep into his leg. He fell in a corridor far from the docking bay. His warriors were dead around him. He could hear the coming closer. He prepared to die. Then strong hands grabbed him under the arms and began to drag him. Looked up and saw Captain Henry Vance, the human merchant captain, pulling him toward safety. "Leave me," said. "Save yourself." Vance did not slow down. His face was red with effort, sweat running down his forehead. "We do not leave people behind," he said. "Any people." He dragged all the way to the Dawn Chaser. He loaded him onto the ship with the other refugees. And when the station finally exploded, consumed by fire, the human vessel was already flying away, packed with 300 survivors who owed their lives to 4 humans who had no reason to save them. In the arena, paused in his story. He looked at the crowd, at the thousands of faces watching him in silence. "The humans lost nothing by fleeing," he said. "They could have escaped. They could have survived. Instead, they chose to risk everything for strangers, for people they had never met, for a species that was not their own." He turned to look at the 12 humans kneeling in chains. I asked Captain Vance why. He told me that humans have a word: compassion. He said it means feeling the pain of others as if it were your own. He said it means you cannot walk away from suffering, even when walking away would save your life. His voice dropped lower. "I have fought for 400 years. I have seen every form of courage this galaxy can produce, but I had never seen anything like that. I had never seen a species that would die for strangers simply because those strangers were in pain." He raised his blade and pointed it at the crowd once more. "That was the first lesson humans taught me, and it was only the beginning." The crowd remained silent as began his second story. His voice was quieter now, filled with a heaviness that came from memories of death. 20 years after station, the Crimson Fever came. It spread across 6 worlds in the border regions, killing millions. The disease turned the scales of infected dark red before it destroyed their organs from the inside. There was no cure. There was no treatment. The death rate was 94%. Was military governor of the border sector when the plague arrived. He did what any leader would do. He ordered quarantine. The infected zones were sealed. No ships could enter. No ships could leave. The sick were abandoned to die alone. This was standard protocol across the galaxy. When a plague could not be stopped, you contained it. You sacrificed the few to save the many. Every species understood this. Every species accepted it. Then the humans came. A medical ship arrived at the edge of the quarantine zone. It was called the Mercy Dawn, and it carried a team of 30 human volunteers. Their leader was a woman named Doctor. She was 38 years old, with short gray hair that had turned early from stress and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Received her transmission personally. "Governor, we are requesting permission to enter the quarantine zone. We are here to help." Stared at the communication screen. He thought he had misheard. "Doctor, the Crimson Fever has a 94% fatality rate. If you enter the quarantine zone, you will die." There was a pause. When Doctor spoke again, her voice was calm. "We know, we are going anyway." Tried to explain. Humans could catch a mild form of the fever. It would not kill them, but it would scar them. It would damage their bodies. There was no logical reason to enter. "There are 2 million people dying in there," Doctor said. "Alone, afraid, without anyone to hold their hands. We cannot cure them, but we can be there. We can make it easier." The ship entered the quarantine zone. For 18 months, watched from outside, he received reports. He saw footage. He witnessed something he had never seen before. The humans could not stop the plague. They did not have the medicine. They did not have the technology. What they had was presence. Doctor worked 20-hour days, moving from bed to bed, checking on patients, adjusting medications, doing everything possible to reduce pain. She held the hands of dying. She learned their names. She learned about their families. She cried with them when the end came. A young man named Ben Archer was only 24 years old. He had never left human space before. On his 3rd week in the quarantine zone, he caught the mild human form of the fever. His skin turned red. His hands shook with constant pain. The senior doctors told him to evacuate. He refused. "There are children in the Eastern Ward," he said. "They know my face. They trust me. I am not leaving them." He stayed for 17 more months. The fever his hands permanently. He never regained full movement in his fingers. But every child in that Eastern Ward who survived remembered the human who read them stories when they were too sick to sleep. Grace was 50 years old. She was not a doctor. She was an administrator, a coordinator. Her job was to organize supplies. It should have been safe work done from a distance. Instead, she flew into the quarantine zone every 2 weeks. She carried supplies personally. She set up distribution centers. She argued with officials who wanted to give up. She never stopped pushing, never stopped working, never stopped believing that every life saved was worth the effort. When the plague finally burned itself out, 120,000 had died, but 30,000 had survived. 30,000 who would have died alone if not for the humans who refused to let them. Visited the medical camp after the quarantine was lifted. He walked through the temporary buildings, past exhausted doctors and nurses, past beds where recovering patients lay weak but alive. He found Doctor sitting alone in a small room. She was staring at a wall covered with photographs. Each photograph showed who had died under her care. There were thousands of them. "Why?" asked. It was the same question he had asked on station 20 years before. Why would you suffer for strangers? Why would you watch them die over and over when you could have stayed safe? Doctor did not look at him. Her eyes remained on the photographs. "Because suffering is suffering," she said. "Pain does not care about species. Fear does not care about borders. When someone is dying alone and afraid, it does not matter what world they come from. It matters that someone is there." She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying. "We could not save them all. We could not even save most of them. But we could make sure they did not die alone. We could make sure someone remembered their names." Stood in silence. He did not have words. "Humans have another word," Doctor said. "Empathy. It means we feel what others feel, not just our own people, everyone. When a child cries, we feel that pain. When an old warrior dies afraid, we feel that fear. We cannot turn it off. We cannot make ourselves stop caring." She smiled, but there was no joy in it. Some people think it is weakness. Maybe they are right, but we cannot be any other way. In the arena, stopped speaking. He looked at the crowd, at the faces of his people staring back at him. 30,000 lives, he said, saved by a species that had nothing to gain, saved by humans who suffered for 18 months, who their own bodies, who watched death every day because they could not bear the thought of strangers dying alone. He pointed at the kneeling humans. You call them weak, you call them soft, but I watched them walk into death itself, again and again, not because they were brave, but because they could not imagine doing anything else. Their empathy would not let them walk away. His voice grew harder. I have commanded armies. I have ordered soldiers to their deaths, but I have never seen courage like that. I have never seen strength that comes not from anger or pride, but from the simple inability to ignore pain. He lowered his arm. That was the second lesson humans taught me. Empathy is not weakness. Empathy is the strength to suffer for others when you could choose not to. His third story began with fire. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, filled with the memory of battle. 15 years ago, the Dominion attacked. They were conquerors, ancient and powerful, and they wanted the hollow moon. The great space station had been built by a civilization long dead, filled with technology no living species understood. Whoever controlled the hollow moon would have power beyond measure. Was High Arbiter by then. He commanded the last fleet, 500 ships against the armada of 25,000. They were surrounded. No reinforcements were coming. The only question was how long they could hold before the end. And fighting beside them was a single company of human marines, 200 soldiers who had been escorting a diplomatic mission when the attack began. They could have fled. Their small ship was fast enough to escape the blockade. Instead, they stayed. Major Diana Cross was 36 years old. She had dark hair cut short and eyes that burned with an intensity had never seen in any species. When he told her that the situation was hopeless, that death was certain, she did not react the way he expected. Accepted death with dignity, they prepared themselves, they found peace. Diana Cross got angry. No, she said. The word came out hard like a blade. We are not dying here. I did not bring my people across the galaxy to die in a pointless last stand. There is no escape, told her. They have 50 ships for every one of ours. The mathematics are clear. Then we changed the mathematics. She gathered her marines and began planning. Watched, confused by their energy. They should have been preparing for honorable death. Instead, they were arguing, shouting, drawing diagrams, running calculations. Corporal Tran was 22 years old. He was thin and nervous, with hands that shook when he was not holding a weapon. He was terrified, could see it in his eyes. But when Diana Cross asked for volunteers for a mission to the station's ancient core, a mission with a 12% chance of survival, Tran was the first to raise his hand. Why? Asked him privately. You are afraid, I can see it. Why would you volunteer to die? Swallowed hard, his hands were shaking. Because I am afraid, he said. If I do not do this, everyone dies. My fear is not more important than their lives. He went into the station's core with 3 other Marines. They activated systems that had been dormant for 1,000,000 years. They created a false signal that made the sensors believe a massive fleet was approaching from behind. The panicked, they split their forces, they fell into chaos. Tran came back alive. He was burned across half his body, barely conscious, carried by the only other survivor. But he was alive. The battle turned, but it was not over. Sergeant was 34 years old. She had scars on her face from a dozen fights, and eyes that had seen too much death. When the breached Corridor 7, heading for the command center where 200 civilians were hiding, stood in their way. Alone. Fall back, ordered through the communication system. You cannot hold them alone. Then they will have to kill me, said, because I am not moving. She held that corridor for 11 minutes, 11 minutes against wave after wave of warriors. She was shot 3 times. She kept fighting. She was cut across the arm. She kept fighting. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she used her knife. When her knife broke, she used her fists. Reinforcements arrived on the 12th minute, collapsed against the wall, covered in blood, barely breathing. "Why?" a medic asked as he treated her wounds. "Why did you not retreat? You could have survived." Looked at him with eyes that were fatting from blood loss. "Because there were children behind me," she said. "I could hear them crying. I could not let them reach them. I could not." She survived barely. The trap worked. The false signal drew the into a killing zone. The ancient station's weapons, activated by Tran's team, destroyed half the enemy fleet in minutes. The rest fled. Against all odds, they had won. Found Diana Cross after the battle. She was sitting alone in a storage room, her back against the wall, her face buried in her hands. She was crying. Major said, "We have won, why do you weep?" Diana looked up at him. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. 40, she said. 40 of my Marines are dead. They trusted me. They followed me. And now they are gone. Their families will never see them again. Their children will grow up without parents. Did not understand. But we won. Their deaths had meaning. They died with honor. Diana stood up. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Honor does not bring them back. Victory does not erase the empty seats at dinner tables back home. I won, and 40 people who trusted me are dead. Do not tell me that should make me happy. She walked past him, toward the medical bay where her wounded were being treated. Stood alone in the storage room for a long time, thinking about what he had seen. In the arena, he looked at the crowd with eyes that burned with memory. Humans do not accept death, he said. They do not prepare for it with dignity. They rage against it. They fight it with every breath, not because they are foolish, but because they believe that giving up is the greatest betrayal. He gestured at the kneeling humans. You think their short lives make them weak, but those short lives make every moment precious. They cannot waste time accepting defeat. They must fight. They must struggle. They must refuse to surrender even when surrender is the logical choice. His voice dropped. And when they win, they do not celebrate. They mourn. Because every victory costs something, and humans feel that cost in their hearts. They carry their dead with them forever. He closed his eyes for a moment. That was the third lesson. Defiance. The refusal to accept what fate demands. The courage to fight when all hope is gone. And the wisdom to remember that victory without grief is not victory at all. The arena was silent. Thousands of sat without moving, without speaking. They had listened to 3 stories of humans, 3 stories that challenged everything they thought they knew. Stood before them, his ancient body tired but his voice still strong. He had carried these memories for 60 years. He had never spoken of them publicly. Now, finally, he was ready. He turned to face the 12 humans kneeling in chains. Captain Lucy looked up at him, tears running down her face. Lieutenant Shaw had stopped shaking. Sergeant Cole was watching with eyes that held something new, something that looked like hope. Spoke to them directly. You came to our space on a diplomatic mission. You made a navigation error. You crossed into sacred territory by accident, not by intent. And for this, my people condemned you to death. He looked back at the crowd. I have told you 3 stories. 3 moments across 60 years when humans showed me what they truly are. Now I will tell you what those stories mean. He walked slowly around the kneeling prisoners, his blade still in his hand but hanging loose at his side. We pride ourselves on honor. We believe in strength. We believe in dignity in the face of death. For 400 years, I believed these were the highest virtues any species could possess. He stopped walking. I was wrong. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rose and fell, ignored them. Humans have something we do not. They have compassion that does not ask whether the suffering one deserves help. They have empathy that crosses the boundaries of species and nation. They have defiance that refuses to accept defeat even when defeat is certain. He raised his blade, not toward the humans but toward the sky. You want to know what humans truly are? I will tell you. His voice rose until it filled every corner of the arena. They are the species that will hold your hand while you die, even if you are a stranger, even if you are an enemy. They will sit with you in darkness and tell you that you are not alone. He turned slowly, making sure everyone in the crowd could see his face. They are the species that will fight when all hope is gone, not because they are foolish, but because they cannot imagine surrendering. Their short lives have taught them that every moment matters, that giving up is the one defeat that cannot be forgiven. He lowered the blade and looked at Lucy. They are the species that will weep for you even as they destroy you. They will mourn their enemies. They will remember the names of those they killed. They do not separate victory from grief. He knelt before the humans, bringing his face close to theirs. They are the most terrifying creatures I have ever encountered, and they are the most beautiful. With a single motion, he cut the chains binding Lucy's wrists. The metal fell away. She stared at him, unable to speak. He moved too, cutting his chains. Then the others, one by one, until all 12 humans stood free in the center of the arena. The crowd erupted. Officials rushed forward, shouting protests. Guards reached for their weapons. Stood and faced them all. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I am High Arbiter. For 400 years I have served the people. I have killed for you. I have bled for you. I have sent thousands to their deaths in your name. And now I am telling you that these humans will not die today. He pointed his blade at the nearest official. Challenge me if you dare, but know that you will have to kill me first, and I have not survived 400 years by being easy to kill. The official stepped back. The guards lowered their weapons. The crowd fell silent again. Turned to Lucy. She was rubbing her wrists where the chains had been, looking at him with wonder and confusion. Go, he said. Return to your people. Tell them that they will not make war on humanity. Not because we fear you, but because after 400 years, I have finally found a species worthy of respect. Lucy found her voice. Why save us? Why now? Smiled. It was a strange expression on his face, unfamiliar from centuries of disuse. 60 years ago, a human captain dragged me to safety when he did not have to. He told me that humans do not leave people behind. I have waited 6 decades to repay that debt. He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out something small and metallic. It was a human medal, old and worn. He held it out to Lucy. Captain Henry Vance gave me this before he died. He said it was for compassion in the face of darkness. I have carried it every day since. Now I give it back to you. Tell your people what it means. Lucy took the medal with trembling hands. She looked at the inscription, then back at. Thank you, she whispered. Shook his head. Do not thank me. Go and be what you are. Go and show the galaxy that strength is not about power. It is about what you do with it. The humans were escorted to their ship. The crowd watched in silence as the vessel lifted off from the arena and rose into the sky. No one tried to stop them. No one spoke. Shaw looked back through the viewport as they broke atmosphere. Far below, he could see the arena growing smaller. Will we see him again? He asked. Cole shook her head. He is old, very old. I do not think he has much time left. Lucy held the medal tight in her hand. She thought about an old warrior who had spent 60 years waiting to repay a kindness. She thought about the stories he had told. He saved us, she said quietly. An enemy saved us because of what we are. She turned to her crew. When we get home, I want you to remember this day. I want you to remember that somewhere in this galaxy, there is an alien warrior who learned about humanity and chose respect over hatred. who saw our compassion and empathy and defiance and decided those were not weaknesses. She looked at the medal one more time. We must never forget what we are. We must never stop being what he described, because somewhere out there people are watching, and what they see will determine whether we are enemies or friends. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished into the stars. Far below in the empty arena, High Arbiter sat alone on his stone throne. The crowd had dispersed. The officials had gone. Only the old warrior remained. He thought about Henry Vance, dead now for 30 years. He thought about Doctor, who had probably passed away from age. He thought about all the humans he had watched across 6 decades. For the first time in 400 years, the old warrior felt something he could not name. It was warm and painful at the same time. It made his chest tight and his eyes sting. Then he understood. It was what humans called hope. He closed his eyes and let himself feel it. After 4 centuries of war, after so much death, after so many battles, he had finally found something worth believing in. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that could not stop caring, that could not accept defeat, that wept for strangers and fought for enemies and never, ever gave up. High Arbiter, the greatest warrior they had ever known, sat alone in the darkness and, for the first time in 400 years, allowed himself to cry. It felt like freedom,